What's going on there, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, welcome back to the vlog. There's a lot of stuff to do, and as you guys can see, I sanded down the pieces that I messed up, and I got them nice and clean, and it's time to cut out some more carbon for these pieces. I guess we can kind of talk about where I think I went wrong last time. You see, so last time I was down here, that day, Friday, it was, I want to say 60 degrees outside, sunny, and I had this heater going. As the day went on, it progressively got colder and colder. As nighttime went down and I started getting ready to lay down epoxy, the temperature outside dropped drastically again. And I think that's ultimately where the issue lies. So obviously when you mix epoxy, I think I'm getting this terminology correctly. When you mix epoxy, it gets starts to warm up, and the more you mix it, it gets warms it up and warms up. Not the not you're not gonna feel how warm it is, but it does change. And obviously the ambient room temperature changes the epoxy and how it's mixed. So I think because it's not insulated down here, so this heater being on all day did nothing for me as it gets colder and colder at night. So I think ultimately the epoxy itself just was not ready, not properly ready for being laid down onto the pieces. Now, some of the pieces did work, obviously, so we're working with the lip kit and the eyelid. Some of the pieces did work. However, they do have their flaws, and I think ultimately the flaws could have been fixed or not even happened if the epoxy was done correctly. Now, the issue is obviously epoxy. You have to mix the epoxy, and as you mix it, you don't want to get air in it and everything. And there's a chance that when I mix epoxy, by the time I get the epoxy ready and start laying it down, there's a good chance that I can mess things up, or the epoxy goes bad, or something like that. So there's a bunch of stuff that we're going to try to do today to correct those issues and hopefully not have this again. So one thing I did find out from mixing epoxy or looking up epoxy and how you should mix it and pour it or brush it out, my understanding is when you mix epoxy, because it starts a chemical reaction and everything like that, once it's mixed, you should then pour it onto the pieces that you are going to epoxy. Reasoning is, as you put your brush into it, you are continuing to mix the epoxy, and as you mix the epoxy, it might not brush out properly or not be smooth, or just something might not go right. So ultimately, I think for these pieces, I'm going to pour epoxy. Now obviously it's going to be a little bit tricky on pieces such as this or other pieces such as that. But we're going to try to figure out a way to set these pieces up not in plastic cups, because that idea was terrible. And we're going to see what we can do from there. Now there's another thing. The other thing, I use a drill with a mixer on it into the big cup. The reason I did that is because obviously that can mix a big cup of epoxy, and honestly mixing it by hand was going to be tough. Now one thing I did not know is that when you mix epoxy fast, you can change the chemicals and the way the chemicals bond together differently. So my understanding is with the drill, you don't want to have it on the highest setting, which I should have known, but that could have caused another thing to be different with the epoxy. And all the other times I've laid down epoxy, I've always been mixing it with just wooden sticks to mix the epoxy. So ultimately, that is a big thing. Now I do have the drill here. There is multiple settings, and I left it on the piece where obviously I was drilling it to where I was using it last time. It is on the drill setting. Obviously now if I go to mix epoxy, I'll have to scrape all this off again, but if I go to mix epoxy again, we're going to set it down to the lowest speed it has, and that's probably still too fast, so we're going to have to kind of like figure it out, mix it up. So there is all that stuff. So there's a bunch of different stuff that goes into mixing epoxy, and ultimately what I'm trying to get my point across is I messed up. And everything could have been avoided if I just done things slower. So here's what I'm going to do, right? for these 3 pieces, alright, I'm going to mix epoxy 1 piece at a time. And I'm going to mix small amounts of epoxy, just enough to coat the piece, and I'm going to mix it in the small cups with the wooden stick. And what I'll do is, once I have these pieces done and they're ready to go, what I'll end up doing is I'll use the bigger cups to mix a greater quantity of epoxy for the top layers of the carbon, for that matter. So then I can pour it across all the pieces and go from there. Now obviously this is all theory at this point, so now we just have to start putting it into place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the pieces that I currently have, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out some carbon, cut it up, and then once we go and lay stuff down, we'll try to, I guess, touch base at that point. I forgot one other thing. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have the heater on, and I'm going to set up a fan, and the reason why is because I want to blow some of that warmth towards the pieces that I'm working on. Because I felt like maybe it just, the way the room is set up and how cold it is, it's just not working out. So that is going to change, hopefully with a nice fan and this heater blowing towards it. What I could do as well is I have another heater up in my living room that I might be able to take down and kind of blow over everything. That might be a better idea. That sounds safer. Alright everybody, so it is officially the next day. I was only able to get 1 piece wrapped in carbon. It just ended up working out this way in terms of time. I want to say I'm actually very happy that I ended up taking the first layer of carbon off and doing this again. I was able to get areas such as this to kind of fill in better. Let me see if I can focus better for you guys. I was able to find areas like this to focus, to set better. It is coming off in certain areas, but I think that's just because of like all the different angles and stuff like that. Same thing here. I was able to kind of get it to wrap around nicely. It comes up a little bit right here, but again, beggars can't be choosers when it comes down to that. All this right here, again, kind of tucked and not really perfect. But what I might be able to do is I might be able to tape this stuff, this side underneath. Tape this side underneath, and once I lay down the top layer of epoxy, maybe this will mold better. Or not. I mean, this is the bottom. I can realistically always cut this piece off and paint it black, which is something I'm going to end up doing for a couple of these pieces. Now, I obviously should kind of explain. So, if you order some carbon pieces, usually, or most of the time, only the stuff that you see is carbon. So, for instance, with my lip kit, only the stuff you would see is this piece and pretty much the top. So this piece right here, yeah, you will see it, but this is typically, and by typically, it is in the wheel well. So what I might do is I might try to clean this edge up a little bit, and then what I'll do is I will actually use like a matte paint or something and paint over this, because again, you really shouldn't see too much of this, so it just wouldn't be necessarily too much of an issue, where if this was just like a flat black tucked into the wheel well. Other than that, I mean, everything else on this piece is pretty much fine, so I think painting this black wouldn't be an issue. Same thing goes for the other piece. It's pretty much the same thing. But most of this piece, I mean, this piece actually came out really good. So I think we have a game plan. I do have trim and bumper paint. That might work out in our favor for stuff like that. But yeah, let's get the other 2 pieces down. We have to figure out how I'm going to hold, obviously, the weird piece, and we'll see what happens. Definitely, I will say this. I waited a lot longer for the epoxy to set yesterday, so I definitely think that played into everything sitting properly on these pieces. So that's a good news. Alright everybody, so I got the epoxy down, or the carbon down on those 2 additional pieces, and now I just mix up some epoxy and I'm going to put those onto these 3 pieces and hopefully let them sit for the next 12 hours and hopefully all goes well. Let's get to it. Alright everybody, that is it for today. We're going to be laying down this epoxy, and now we have to wait for pretty much, at this rate, it's going to be till tomorrow afternoon when I get out of work. But I think ultimately this epoxy should solidify everything that, like the minor imperfections that were going on, and use the heat gun afterwards to try to make sure that there is no bubbles in this layer. This layer does get sanded down, but I just want to make sure that there is no like big bubbles hidden and deep within the epoxy. So there is that. Now it's just time to wait. Alright guys, so it's actually the next day. What I did with the tape, by trusting it over to the other side and basically ratcheting it down, that seemed to have worked the best. Unfortunately, this is some of the epoxy that came out of there. I'm going to have to try to cut it off, use a Dremel to cut it off. There's the tape underneath it, so I'm going to have to figure out a way to get that out of there. Same thing over here, it's kind of like weird with the epoxy and tape. I'm gonna have to try to sand that down, and I don't know. I'll try to figure that one out. Right here again, kind of same thing on this side. Was able to tuck it down nice and get it in there. And this kind of messed up, but I think I know where I went wrong. And the eyelids, I was able to fix those kind of. One of them I might have to sand down entirely and do again. All right, everybody. So this video kind of jumps all over the place, and I'm sorry for that. We kind of got like sidetracked by all the waiting games and stuff like that. I want to say we're kind of in an okay spot. Obviously, there's certain things I gotta fix when it comes down to like the epoxy that's stuck onto the top of the one trim piece, and that's all going to be fine, and we'll end up fixing it and everything. But yeah, there's just so much to go on when it comes down to this stuff, and there's so much that can happen, and obviously I'm just not quite up to the point yet where I can figure things out and not worry about it. So sorry for kind of bringing you guys along like this. It's kind of just dragging it out, but the next video, guys, we have something else going on, so I would love to bring you guys along with that, and it will be out of this basement for at least that video, and potentially more. So I'm going to end this video here, guys. I'm going to continue to work on this stuff behind the scenes, and as things go on, I will include you guys with everything that's going on with all this carbon fiber bits, especially interior, exterior wise, just, bring you guys along with it as time goes. But yeah, that's gonna be it for today's video, guys. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for kind of understanding with what's going on and stuff like that. And please give this video a thumbs up. If you aren't subscribed, please subscribe, and I will talk to you guys in the next video. Alright, everybody, so I'm on my way over to take a look at a garage that Alex and I are potentially going to rent, or assist with renting, and we'll see how it goes. I'm flying solo today, and if everything works out well and you guys are seeing this, that means we're going to be doing something good here in the near future, and we'll take Alex along to take a look at this location as well. Talk to you guys when I talk to you guys next.